Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, the show where we dig deep into the insights of some of the leading policymakers in the Middle East and indeed the world. I'm Frank Kane. Today I'm delighted to be joined from Washington, D.C. by Fahad Nazer, the spokesman for the Embassy of Saudi Arabia in the American capital. Mr. Nazer, welcome to Frankly Speaking.
It's good to be with you, Frank.
It's a pleasure to have you. Mr. Nazer, you started the job in January 2019, which was a very tough time for any spokesperson on behalf of the kingdom, and especially in Washington. 2.5 years later, there was a new US administration with new set of challenges. Tell me, what is the current status, in your view, of bilateral relations with America? And frankly speaking, can Saudi Arabia still regard itself as a steadfast US ally?
Well, thank you for your question, Frank. Saudi-US relations are long-standing. They have endured for the past 75 years. Not only have they endured, but they have continued to deepen and to strengthen and to broaden under both Republican and Democratic administrations. The relationship in many ways is multidimensional. There's a political component to it. There's a military and security component. There's an economic component, and there's a very much somewhat underrated people-to-people component as well of the relationship, which explains why it has endured and withstood the test of time for so long.
Okay, you say that, but one of the first things that the Biden administration did was to take the Houthi militias in Yemen off the terrorist list earlier this year. This despite repeated attacks on civilian targets in the kingdom and brutality against Yemenis, not to mention the burning alive of 50 Ethiopian migrants. Is the Biden administration being badly advised? What can your government do to better explain the reality of what's happening in Yemen?
Well, Saudi Arabia and the United States are actually working very closely on multiple fronts to resolve a number of conflicts in the region, and the conflict and ongoing crisis in Yemen is certainly at the top of our agenda. I think that we very much, our policies align to a great extent. We are both supportive of the UN efforts to resolve this conflict. We both are trying to advance a political resolution of the conflict. We are also both providers of humanitarian aid. In fact, Saudi Arabia is the top provider of humanitarian aid to Yemen over the past 6 years. We have provided $17 billion in various forms of assistance. So our dialogue with the United States is ongoing on Yemen and a number of other fronts. And we are hoping that we are on the right track towards bringing this conflict to an end.
If there were a better understanding of the war in Yemen, wouldn't that facilitate the necessary arms sales and logistical support that Saudi Arabia needs to defend itself? The US has recently withdrawn Patriot batteries. Frankly speaking, do you think that the US is turning its back on the kingdom?
No, certainly not. As I said at the outset, Saudi-US relations are multidimensional. The cooperation on the security and military front remains to be a pillar of this relationship. I think the United States appreciates and understands the real threat that Saudi Arabia faces on its southern border and from the Houthi militia. Obviously, as you know, His Royal Highness Prince Khalid bin Salman was just in Washington over the past couple of days. He met with a number of top senior US officials in the US administration at both the Department of Defense, the Department of State, and the White House. And it's very clear from our engagements with the administration and from the statements, especially from the Yemen envoy, Tim Lenderking, that the United States understands the threat that the Houthis present, not just to the stability and prosperity of Yemen, but also to the security of Saudi Arabia and indeed to the security of the international community. So we're working very closely towards stabilizing the situation in Yemen.
Another area of disagreement between Saudi Arabia and the US is the Iran nuclear deal. Tell me, what concerns, what differences of opinion do you communicate to the Americans, and are they listening?
Well, as I said, Saudi Arabia and the United States have an ongoing and robust dialogue over a host of issues. Certainly the nuclear program, weapons program in Iran is among the many issues that we discuss on a regular basis. We have made our concerns known about the JCPOA back when it was first signed, even though ultimately we did support it, and we will support anything that ensures that Iran does not possess the know-how or the technology to produce nuclear weapons. But we've always had some concerns about one, the sunset clauses of the agreement, which in effect render it temporary in nature. We want something more permanent, and we also had concerns about the nuclear, or rather the missile program in Iran. And perhaps most importantly, we've always had concerns about not addressing Iran's support of militant and non-state actors in the region. We've always felt that all of these issues have to be addressed and agreed to in tandem.
Tell me, why in particular can't the Democrats see Iran for what it is?
Well, I think you'll have to address that question to Democratic members of Congress here. But it's important to note that we do maintain good relations with not only with the U.S. administration, but we have continuing dialogue with leaders in Congress of both Democrats and Republicans. I think that there is an appreciation, certainly it's become clear to us over the past few months, that the leadership in Congress understands the very serious security concerns that Saudi Arabia faces in Yemen and elsewhere. And as I said, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia work on multiple fronts. Yemen is one of them, but we also work very closely on countering the threat that the international community and the region faces from non-state actors and terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We work closely towards stabilizing international energy markets, and the list really goes on and on. So I think what you see is a continuity among various U.S. administrations in appreciating the constructive role that Saudi Arabia plays in promoting peace and stability, promoting stable international energy markets, and the cooperation that we have on multiple fronts.
In recent years, Mr. Nazer, the kingdom has grown closer to Russia and China. How is this viewed in Washington? Is it frowned upon, or might it be regarded as a useful conduit from a trusted ally to other countries?
Well, I think it's important to keep in mind that Saudi Arabia maintains good and robust relations with really the overwhelming majority of countries around the world. It makes perfect sense for us to maintain and to build new relations with emerging powers like Russia, China, India, and others. At the same time, we continue to have longstanding relations with the United States, with the United Kingdom, with France and other countries, as well as obviously excellent relations with our neighbors in the region. However, it's important to note that even if we develop some new relations, whether it's China, India, or other countries, that has not come at the expense of our longstanding relations, other relations with the United States or UK or the other. We do not see our foreign policy through a zero-sum prism.
Okay. We know for a fact that the UAE embassy in Washington played a major role in paving the way for last year's Abraham Accords. Tell me, frankly speaking, do you envisage Saudi Arabia going down the same path? And what role, if any, would your embassy be playing in that process?
Well, Saudi Arabia's policy on the conflict, on the dispute between Israelis and Palestinians has been very consistent for many years. In fact, it was Saudi Arabia that presented what is known as the Arab Peace Initiative back in 2002 at the Arab League Summit in Beirut. And basically, that offer is still on the table, and it offers Israel full recognition with all 21 members of the Arab League in return for a full and comprehensive and fair peace deal with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution and on the 67 border. That deal is still on the table. We believe that once that core dispute is resolved and peace is reached between Israelis and Palestinians, that opens the way not only for peace with Saudi Arabia, but with the rest of the members of the Arab League.
What did you make of the recent visit by John Kerry, the US Special Envoy on Climate, to Saudi Arabia? How are the kingdom's green initiatives being viewed in the USA?
So Saudi Arabia is fully committed to sustainable development. We have embraced it. We're taking very seriously the threat to our climate. We also believe that harnessing the power of science and technology will enable us to meet some of these challenges, including the challenges to our climate. So the US and Saudi Arabia, in fact, also share, they have a common agreement, I think, certainly on a number of issues related to climate. When Secretary Kerry was in the kingdom, there was a joint statement that was released after the meeting, and both countries, again, stressed their commitment to sustainable development. They stressed their commitment to the Paris Agreement. They stressed their commitment to clean energy. In fact, Saudi Arabia is investing a lot of resources into developing clean energy, specifically solar and wind. We believe that we will have a comparative advantage when it comes to that. And also we are embracing other technologies to mitigate the impact of greenhouse emissions. We have adopted what is known as the recyclable carbon economy. And that basically the objectives there is to reduce and remove, recycle and reuse carbon emissions. We are the leaders in some of the carbon capture technologies in the world, and we share many of this outlook with the United States on that issue as well.
The DC embassy has been very active in public diplomacy, hasn't it, beyond Washington? And you yourself have been giving media interviews and talks outside the capital. This is a deliberate strategy, I guess, but what are you hoping to achieve from this?
Right. So as I said, our leadership does maintain excellent relations with the administration in Washington, D.C. We'll also maintain a robust and ongoing dialogue with leadership in Congress. At the same time, we have always obviously realized that the United States is a big country, and it's become very clear to us that there are other groups outside of D.C. that are very much interested in developments in the kingdom. They're interested in Vision 2030. So we're talking about whether it's academic institutions, civil society groups, and certainly the business community. So we have made it a point to engage with all these communities because it's become clear that many of them want to maintain longstanding relationships. At the same time, others want to build new relationships with various entities in the kingdom. So whenever an opportunity presents itself, we engage with Americans outside of Washington, D.C. to not only talk about developments, economic, social, and others in the kingdom, but also to stress the importance and the benefits that this bilateral relationship has had on the, obviously not just, broadly speaking on U.S.-Saudi relations, but also the benefits that have accrued on the various states in the U.S.
Mr. Nazer, how is your relationship going with the American press? Do you think it's fair? Can they recognize the reforms that are underway in the kingdom while at the same time criticizing constructively, perhaps, when something goes wrong?
Well, we maintain ongoing engagements with the media here. I spend, in fact, most or certainly the bulk of my day fielding various requests from American media. I think it's very clear to us that there's a lot of interest in not just Saudi foreign policy, but there's a lot of interest in Vision 2030, its various components, some of the economic reforms, some of the social reforms. We try our best to have an open channel of communication with the media to address their questions, because they obviously help us amplify our message to not just policymakers here, but to the broader American public. Obviously, the American press it's a very big institution. And, since your show is called Frankly Speaking, I will say, frankly speaking, some media outlets, I think, are perhaps more balanced than others, but we are generally open to engaging with any media outlet that is interested in anything Saudi related.
You have witnessed the appointment of the kingdom's first ever female ambassador, Princess Rima bint Bandar, who is, of course, the daughter of Saudi Arabia's legendary former ambassador, Prince Bandar. Tell me, how is it working with the princess, and how much resemblance do you think there is between her style and her father's management and diplomacy style?
Well, I can tell you that being the spokesperson for the Embassy of Saudi Arabia in Washington, is a privilege, it's an honor, and it has certainly been a privilege and an honor to work under the leadership of Her Royal Highness Princess Rima bin Bandar. She maintains excellent relations with officials here in Washington, D.C., but as you said, she has also been speaking to all sorts of Americans outside of D.C. over the past couple of years. She has, in many ways, I mean, I often, technically I'm the official spokesperson, but Her Royal Highness in her engagements with Americans, I think makes an excellent impression. She knows the United States very well. Obviously, she essentially grew up here. She spent 20 years in Washington, D.C. when her father, His Royal Highness Prince Bandar, was the ambassador to the United States. So she knows Washington. She knows the United States more broadly. She went to school here. And, I don't want to speak on behalf of Her Highness too much, but I think she likes the United States. And I think she certainly feels passionately about the relationship. And I think that comes through in all her engagements.
On a personal note, Mr. Nazer, what is next for you? Of course, right before you joined the embassy, you were a columnist for Arab News in Washington, in the US, weren't you? And my sources at the newspaper tell me that you were in talks to become Arab News bureau chief in DC. Do you miss writing, or will you continue working with the Saudi Foreign Ministry?
Yes, as I said, being the spokesperson for the Saudi embassy in Washington has been the highlight of my career so far. It is an honor and a privilege. It is a tremendous responsibility, and I certainly look forward to continuing in this role for the foreseeable future. Although I did enjoy working with, writing for Arab News as well.
Mr. Nazer, it's been fascinating. Thank you indeed for the candid insights and for appearing on Frankly Speaking.
Thank you very much, Frank. It's been my pleasure.